A day meant to shine turns dark. The morning sun streamed through the modest window of a small apartment in downtown Los Angeles. The room was warm and inviting, walls adorned with family photos, books stacked carefully on the shelves, and sticky notes with handwritten reminders in bright, cheerful colors. This was Emily Dawson's world. It was simple, but it was hers. Today was a big day. No, today was the day. Emily had been preparing for this moment for months. After saving diligently from her job as a waitress at a local cafe, cutting back on snacks, skipping outings, and putting away every spare dollar, she was finally ready. She was going to the bank to open her very first savings account. Not because someone told her to. Not because someone was helping her. Because she earned it. Because she could. As she stood in front of the mirror, brushing her brown curls and straightening her favorite blouse, Emily took a deep breath and whispered the same words she'd been repeating every morning for the past week. "You can do this, Emily. You've got this." The notebook she clutched in her hand was filled with careful notes, step-by-step instructions on how to open an account, questions to ask, reminders to stay calm and speak clearly. Each page was scribbled with effort, love, and the determination of someone who refused to be underestimated. You see, Emily has Down syndrome, and in a world that often places limits on people like her, this wasn't just a bank errand. It was a quiet revolution. By 9 a.m., Emily had stepped out of her apartment and onto the bustling sidewalk. Her shoes were polished, her ID neatly tucked into a plastic folder, and her smile, though a little nervous, was genuine. She walked with purpose, pride, and a kind of hope that only comes from knowing you've worked hard for something. One thought you could do. But what Emily didn't know was that the bank, where she expected to be welcomed with a smile and a form, was about to become the stage for something entirely different, a place where her confidence would be tested, her voice ignored, and her dignity called into question. She didn't know that the people she'd encounter inside wouldn't see her preparation, her effort, or her right to be there. They would see only her condition. She also didn't know that someone else was watching, someone quiet, someone unexpected, someone who had walked into that very same bank not to make headlines, not to give a speech, but simply to run an errand. That man was Justin Bieber, and what he witnessed that morning would stir something deep inside him, a fire that would not only shift the fate of Emily's day, but ripple far beyond the bank walls. So, what really happened in that bank? Keep watching. Because once you hear Emily's story and what Justin did, you'll never forget it. The line that broke her confidence. The bank was already busy when Emily arrived. Long lines snaked toward the door and frustrated murmurs echoed off the walls. The air smelled faintly of printer ink and stale coffee, and the tension in the room was almost tangible. Customers tapped their feet impatiently, while staff rushed between counters, visibly overwhelmed by the crowd. Emily hesitated at the entrance for a moment, then took a deep breath and stepped forward. She clutched her folder tightly against her chest, her heart thudding with anticipation and nerves. This was the place. This was the moment she had worked so hard for. Every tip she'd saved, every late night studying her checklist, it all led here. She stood in line quietly, barely noticed by the people around her. A few glanced her way with mild curiosity, others with indifference. Emily didn't mind. She rehearsed the words in her head. "I'd like to open a savings account." Again and again, she mouthed the phrase silently, determined to get it right. She glanced down at her notes, tracing the bullet points with her finger, whispering softly under her breath. When her turn finally came, she was directed to a counter where a woman with a name tag that read Brittany sat behind a screen. Brittany looked up briefly, her eyes tired and her tone impatient. "What do you need?" she asked flatly. Emily stepped forward with a hopeful smile. "I'd like to open a savings account, please." Brittany took the folder from Emily and began flipping through the documents without much care. Her eyes scanned the forms quickly, her fingers tapping the desk in annoyance. Then her expression shifted. She let out a sigh. "You filled this out." "Wrong," Brittany said, pointing at 2 spots on the form. "Here and here. We can't accept it like this." Emily's smile faltered. I followed the guide. I thought I did everything right." "Well, you didn't," Brittany replied, sharply. "You'll need to come back with someone who knows how to do this." Emily blinked, confused. "I am the one who— I checked everything. I followed the steps." Brittany cut her off with a slight smirk. "Look, sweetheart, there's no point insisting. This is wrong. Come back with a guardian or someone who can help you." The words hit like a slap. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she looked down at her papers. "But I'm my own guardian," she said, her voice quieter now. "I can prove—" Before she could finish, Brittany rolled her eyes and raised her voice. "You're wasting my time. Let someone else handle this, okay?" The words rang out, louder than they needed to be. Conversations in the lobby paused. Heads turned. Suddenly, everyone was looking at Emily. Her cheeks burned. Her eyes welled. She lowered her head, clutching the folder tightly, as if it could shield her from the dozens of stares piercing her like needles. Brittany waved her hand. "Please wait over there," she said, pointing toward a nearby chair with a tone of finality. Emily turned slowly and walked to the seat. Her body felt heavy. Her feet dragged slightly. The whispers started as she sat down. She could hear them, soft, quick, and merciless. What's going on with her? She doesn't belong here. Why would they let someone like that come alone? Emily opened her folder again, looking through the documents with desperate hope. She traced every line, rereading every note she had made. "I did everything right," she whispered. "I did everything right." She repeated it like a prayer, like a shield against the shame closing in on her from all sides. The world around her blurred as tears threatened to fall, but she wouldn't let them. She wouldn't cry. Not here, not now. She sat still, head bowed, lips trembling, trying to hold on to the last shred of dignity she had walked in with. A few minutes later, a man in a grey suit approached. He wore a polished smile and a manager's name tag. Greg. He leaned slightly toward Emily, his tone rehearsed and polished. "Miss Dawson, I'm Greg, the branch manager. I was informed about your situation. Let's have a quick chat, shall we?" Emily nodded and followed him to a quiet corner of the bank. She sat across from him at a small desk and tried to explain her purpose again. She spoke slowly, carefully, her voice shaking as she pointed out each document. Greg listened, nodding and smiling, but something in his expression didn't feel right. There was patience, but it felt fake, too polished, too patronizing. Then he interrupted. I see, he said, raising an eyebrow. "But are you sure you're ready to manage a bank account, on your own? Something like this can be complicated." Emily's heart sank again, but she didn't back down. "Yes," she said more firmly. "I've worked very hard. I know how to manage my money." Greg folded his hands together and leaned back in his chair. "Look, I'm not saying you're incapable," he said, "but our protocols require certain formalities. For example, your documents don't have a legal guardian's signature. That's a problem." Emily furrowed her brow. "I am my own guardian," she replied. "I don't need a signature." Greg let out a short, polite laugh. "Well, technically, yes, but we need to ensure everything is appropriate. Why don't you come back another day with someone who can verify your situation?" Emily sat there, stunned, her hands clenched around her folder. She knew this wasn't about forms or signatures. It was about assumptions. Assumptions that she couldn't possibly handle something as simple as opening a bank account. Before she could respond, the sound of whispers drifted over again. Two men in line spoke just loud enough to be heard. She probably doesn't even know what she's doing here. Why do they let people like that handle complicated things? Emily's stomach turned. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to block it all out. She tried to remind herself why she came, what she had earned, what she deserved. She opened her eyes again and spoke, her voice trembling but clear. "My documents are correct. I checked everything before I came. I just want to open my account today," Greg sighed. "Wait here," he said, rising to his feet. "I'll check on something." He walked back toward the counter. Emily sat alone at the small table, the whispers around her still swirling like a storm. But what she didn't know, what no one in the room knew, was that someone had been watching, quietly, carefully. Someone who had walked into the bank just moments before her. Someone who had seen every glance, every word, every humiliation. More than just protocol. Greg stood at the front counter, leaning in to speak with Brittany in a low voice. From her seat across the room, Emily couldn't hear every word, but she could see their faces. Brittany looked annoyed. Greg looked exasperated. Occasionally, they glanced in her direction, and every time they did, her chest tightened a little more. She doesn't look like she even understands what's going on. Why waste time on this? Emily's fingers gripped the folder tighter. Each passing second made her feel smaller, like the walls of the bank were closing in around her. Greg walked back over with a strained smile. "Thanks for waiting," he said. "We're still reviewing your documents. In the meantime, please stay seated." Emily nodded silently, though her pulse was pounding in her ears. She looked down again, her eyes scanning the pages she already knew by heart. She'd practiced this moment so many times. She had done everything right, but none of that seemed to matter now. As she sat there, something even more humiliating happened. A man in the corner, someone she hadn't even noticed, pulled out his phone and took a photo of her. Click. Emily flinched at the sound. "Sad," he muttered to the person beside him. "Just sad." The phone disappeared into his pocket, but the damage was already done. Emily lowered her head, blinking quickly to keep the tears from falling. Her humiliation wasn't just emotional now, it was public. What she didn't know was that the photo had already been posted online. Within minutes, it would begin spreading, shared by people who had no idea what was really happening, passing judgment from behind their screens. But before any of that could reach her, something else was unfolding. In a far corner of the bank, nearly hidden from view, a man wearing a cap and sunglasses sat with his arms crossed. He had come in earlier for personal business, hoping to stay anonymous. But now, his focus was fixed squarely on Emily. Justin Bieber had seen the entire exchange. Brittany's dismissive tone, Greg's condescension, the whispers, the looks, the photo. He had said nothing so far, but his eyes, shielded behind dark lenses, were locked in. People like her are always underestimated, aren't they? That sentence came from an elderly man seated beside him. Justin gave a slight nod, but said nothing. He had grown used to being in the spotlight, used to cameras and scrutiny. But this was something different. This was raw. This was wrong. And he knew it. From where he sat, he could hear Greg and Brittany talking again. "She's not worth the time. We have quotas to meet. It's obvious she doesn't understand how this works." Justin took a breath. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them slowly. He looked back at Emily, still sitting, still trying, still fighting to hold herself together. Emily wasn't crying, but she was close, and still she stood up. She walked back to Greg's desk, folder in hand, voice trembling but persistent. "I've done everything I was asked to," she said. "Please, I just want to open my account." Greg barely looked up. "I've already explained. Without a legal guardian, we can't do anything. You'll need to come back another day." "But I am my own guardian," she repeated, more firmly this time. Greg sighed and raised his hand. "Miss Dawson, I've told you already. Come back another day with a legal guardian. Do I need to spell it out for you?" Silence. Emily stood still for a long moment. Then slowly, she turned toward the door. Every step she took was heavier than the last. Her vision blurred. The whispers returned. She doesn't get it. She shouldn't be here alone. Justin stood. The sound of his chair scraping against the floor cut through the murmurs like a knife. He walked forward, slowly, deliberately. His voice was calm, but firm. This has gone far enough. Brittany froze. Greg looked up, confused. Emily stopped walking. Justin stepped between her and the counter. His posture relaxed, but his tone unmistakably serious. "Can you explain why you're treating this customer like this?" he asked. Brittany blinked. "Sir, this is none of your concern." Justin removed his sunglasses. The effect was immediate. A gasp, a whisper, a ripple through the bank. Justin Bieber. The name moved through the crowd like a shockwave, but he didn't acknowledge the reactions. His eyes remained on Brittany. "When something like this happens in public," he said, "it becomes everyone's concern." Brittany tried to recover. "We're just following protocols." "Protocols," Justin repeated, "or prejudice dressed up as paperwork." Greg hurried over, his nervousness visible now. "Is there a problem here?" "Yes," Justin replied, not missing a beat. He pointed to Emily. "This customer came prepared. She followed your instructions, so why is she being denied service?" Greg stammered. "We're just ensuring everything is handled correctly." Justin picked up Emily's folder. He flipped through the documents quickly, then looked back at both of them. "These are correct," he said. "Everything is here. So let me ask again. Why aren't you helping her?" Silence. Emily looked up at him, stunned. She hadn't said a word since he stepped in, but her eyes said everything. Gratitude, disbelief, and for the first time that morning, hope. Justin turned to her and gave the smallest nod. "You're not alone." Then he looked back at Brittany. "You humiliated her. You made her feel small in front of strangers. And now, you're trying to justify it." Brittany opened her mouth but said nothing. Justin didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The weight of his words filled the room. "This is unacceptable," he said. "And it ends now." Greg looked around. Customers were watching. Phones were out. Whispers turned into quiet support. Emily stood a little straighter. Her hands still trembled, but her chin lifted slightly. She wasn't invisible anymore, and Justin wasn't going anywhere. A quiet witness in the corner. For a moment, no one moved. The bank, moments earlier buzzing with murmurs and motion, now stood frozen. Every eye was on the man standing between the customer and the counter. Not because he was famous, though they now recognized him, but because of the calm conviction in his voice. Justin Bieber wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. His presence alone commanded silence. Greg cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "Mr. Bieber, I understand your concern, but this really isn't..." Justin held up a hand. "This isn't about me. This is about her." He nodded toward Emily. "And the way you've treated her from the moment she walked in." Greg hesitated. "We're not trying to discriminate. We're just following our guidelines to make sure everything is handled properly." Justin looked down at the papers in his hand again, slowly turning the pages. "These documents are filled out correctly. Nothing is missing. So tell me, Greg, where exactly is the problem?" Brittany shifted uncomfortably behind the counter, her earlier confidence shrinking with each passing second. "Sometimes people think they filled it out right, but we have to be sure they actually understand what they're signing." Justin raised an eyebrow, his voice quiet but sharp. "Are you suggesting she doesn't understand, even though she brought everything you asked for? Even though she came prepared, followed instructions, and asked for help respectfully?" Brittany's lips parted, but no words came out. Justin turned, to face the small crowd now gathering closer. "This isn't about paperwork. This is about dignity, about respect." He turned back to Greg. "And from what I've seen, you gave her none." Greg stepped forward, attempting diplomacy. Let's all stay calm here. Maybe we can resolve this more privately. Justin shook his head. No. This happened publicly. You embarrassed her in front of everyone here. So we're going to resolve it publicly too. Emily's eyes shimmered with something new. Not just tears, but strength. She stepped forward, her voice trembling but unwavering. I just want to be treated like anyone else. I worked hard. I followed every rule. What more do you want from me? The silence that followed was heavier than before. Not because it was empty, but because her words carried weight. Justin gave her a glance of deep admiration. Then he turned back to Greg. You heard her. And now, you're going to listen. Greg sighed, shifting uncomfortably. Look, I understand. But sometimes things take more time when there are special considerations. Special considerations, Justin repeated, his voice now edged with disbelief. That's what you call this? He held up the folder. This woman came here prepared. She did her part, and instead of supporting her, you judged her. You made her feel like a burden, like a problem. Brittany spoke up, her voice faint. I didn't mean for it to happen like that. I was just trying to follow the process. Justin turned slowly toward her. And when the process is broken, when the process hurts people who don't deserve it, do you still follow it, or do you choose what's right? Brittany looked down, unable to meet his gaze. A woman in the line raised her voice. She's not the only one. I've seen them do this before, to elderly customers, to people who don't speak English fluently. A man beside her nodded. My brother is autistic. They made him come back 3 times, said the same things. Come with someone who understands. He did understand. The murmurs began to grow louder again, but this time they weren't whispers of judgment. They were voices of shared experience, of solidarity. The crowd was no longer a passive audience. They were witnesses, and they were speaking. Greg held up his hands. All right. We don't want to upset anyone. We'll review her documents again. Justin leaned in slightly. Not review, process them. Treat her like every other customer. Reluctantly, Brittany took the folder and began typing into her computer. Her fingers trembled slightly. Emily watched her, unsure of whether to feel relieved or angry. Greg turned to Justin. Look, we're under a lot of pressure here. Deadlines. Quotas. Sometimes things happen. Justin's expression hardened. That's not an excuse. You don't get to treat someone's humanity as optional because you're having a busy day. Brittany's typing slowed. She paused for a moment and looked up. Everything looks correct. There's nothing wrong with her documents. Greg closed his eyes, then opened them slowly. Fine. Then we'll open the account. But Justin didn't move. He folded his arms. Not until you tell her why this happened. Not until you admit that this wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice. Greg glanced nervously around the room. Phones were out again. Someone was already live streaming. Emily looked up. I want to hear it, not just for me, for everyone else you made feel like this. Greg exhaled. There may be practices, unspoken ones, things that develop over time. We don't write them down, but they happen. That doesn't make it right. Justin nodded slowly. You're right. It doesn't. Brittany finally looked at Emily. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry, I really am. Emily stood in silence, letting the apology sink in. For a moment, no one said anything. Then Justin spoke again. Respect isn't a reward, it's the baseline. The fact that she had to fight this hard to be treated like a regular customer, that should haunt you. The elderly man who had spoken earlier stepped forward. What he said, he's right. This isn't about rules, it's about how we choose to treat each other. Greg looked around at the crowd, visibly shaken. We'll be reviewing all our internal practices. This won't happen again. Justin gave a half nod, not of approval, but acknowledgement. It better not. Emily looked over at him. Her voice was soft, but filled with resolve. Thank you for standing up for me. Justin smiled. You stood up for yourself. I just made sure they heard you. She smiled back, small but real. The corner of the bank that once tried to swallow her whole had now become the place where she reclaimed her voice, and everyone was listening. Justin steps forward. The atmosphere inside the bank had shifted. Just moments ago, it was a place of quiet humiliation, a cold, transactional environment where empathy seemed absent. But now, with every word Justin Bieber spoke, the temperature changed. The tension didn't disappear, but it transformed. It sharpened, focused, aimed itself at the people who had stayed silent, followed the rules, and turned dignity into a delay. Emily stood at the counter, her hands still gripping the edges of her folder. Brittany had confirmed that everything was correct. Greg had promised to process the account, but for Justin, that wasn't enough. The apology wasn't complete without accountability. The damage had already been done, and unless it was named, it would repeat. You see, Justin began, turning slowly to address the full room. This isn't just about one bank account. This is about how easy it's become to dismiss people, to underestimate them, to act like their presence is a problem that needs managing. His voice didn't rise, but his words landed with force. It's in the tone of voice, the look of disbelief, the way a person's effort, her careful preparation, is tossed aside like it means nothing. And then, when someone notices, it's brushed off with, "We were just following procedure." That excuse ends today. Customers who had stayed quiet now began nodding, some whispering in agreement. A woman near the door wiped a tear from her eye. A teenager in the line pulled out their phone, now recording. Greg stepped forward cautiously. "Mr. Bieber, we understand your concerns, and as I said, we will take steps." "No," Justin cut in, his tone sharper now. "Not concerns, not suggestions. What happened here was public degradation of someone who did absolutely nothing wrong." He turned to Emily, speaking now just to her. "You came in here with pride, with your own voice, with your own money, and they tried to make you feel small." Emily looked down, blinking away tears. But this time, they weren't from shame. They were from being seen, from finally not having to prove her worth alone. "You don't need to explain yourself to anyone here," Justin continued. "You don't need to defend your independence. You earned it." Greg cleared his throat. "I understand that we made mistakes." Justin looked at him, voice calm but unwavering. "Not mistakes, patterns. This isn't the first time, and unless something changes, it won't be the last." At that, another customer stepped forward. "My cousin went through this too. He has cerebral palsy. They said the same thing, come back with someone else. Made him feel like a child." A man behind her added, "My dad's in a wheelchair. He says the bank always talks down to him, like they're doing him a favor just for showing up." A wave of voices rippled through the room, one after another confirming what Justin had just called out. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a culture. Greg looked overwhelmed now, his posture more slumped, his confidence fading. "We'll do an internal review, training, awareness programs." "That's a start," Justin replied. "But don't just train your staff, change your mindset. Respect isn't extra, it's the minimum." Then he turned back to Brittany, who still stood at the computer, her face pale and her hands shaking slightly. "You had a choice," he told her. "In every word you spoke to her, in every glance, you chose dismissal over decency. And you did it publicly." I was just doing what we're taught," she stammered. Justin didn't shout, he didn't belittle her, but his words carried weight. "Then it's time you're taught something better." He turned back to the crowd. "We can't wait for systems to change themselves, people change them. One decision at a time. In this room today, we all saw what happens when we look away, and what happens when someone decides not to." Greg finally raised his voice just slightly, trying to reassert control. "Let's bring this back to the customer. Miss Dawson, we are opening your account now. You'll be treated with the full respect and attention any other client receives. Emily didn't move. Instead, she stepped forward, turned toward the rest of the bank, and spoke with a strength that surprised even herself. I didn't come here to cause a scene. I just wanted to open an account. I followed the rules. I brought everything they asked, but they didn't see that. They only saw me and assumed that wasn't enough. She paused. Her voice shook, but didn't break. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking not to be treated like less. Someone in the back clapped once, then twice, then more hands joined in. The sound grew, not thunderous, not wild, but real, raw, sincere. Justin smiled softly. He looked over at Greg and Brittany. Now you know. Now you've heard it. It's up to you what you do next. Brittany took a deep breath and finally said, Miss Dawson, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Greg nodded beside her. We both were. Emily nodded slowly, then turned back to the computer screen, where her information was being entered. I'd like to finish what I started, she said. Brittany entered the final details, double-checked the form, and hit Submit. A small printer to the side whirred to life, and a receipt began to print. She tore it carefully, then handed it over with both hands. Your account is open, Brittany said softly. And thank you for your patience. Emily took the receipt, gently, holding it in her hands like something precious. She looked up at Justin, eyes shining. I did it, she said, half to herself. Yes, he replied. You did. And for the first time that day, the room was filled not with whispers, but with quiet respect. When one voice becomes many. The soft hum of the printer had stopped, but the energy inside the bank remained electric. Emily held the receipt for her newly opened account like a badge of honor. Her hands, once trembling from fear, now steadied, with something new, resolve. She had entered this bank as a customer. She now stood as a symbol of something far greater. Greg cleared his throat, attempting to close the moment politely. Again, on behalf of the bank, I sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding. We will review our processes and ensure this doesn't happen again. But Justin wasn't ready to let it end so easily. This doesn't end with a receipt and an apology, he said, his voice calm but deliberate. It ends when you understand why this happened, and when you choose to make sure it never happens to anyone else again. Greg nodded, his posture now completely humbled. You're right. We have blind spots. We've let patterns go unchecked. That ends today. Across the room, customers who had previously stood idle now stepped forward. Not just to watch, but to be part of the change. A young mother with a stroller raised her hand. If I'm being honest, I've been in here before with my autistic son. We were treated coldly too. I thought it was just me. An older man stepped out of the line. My wife's in early stages of dementia. I come with her to help with bills. Last month, someone here told her she needed to bring a power of attorney, even though we'd done this for years. One by one, voices rose. Not in outrage, but in truth, in shared experience, in unity. A middle-aged man in a suit spoke next. I'm a lawyer, and I can tell you right now, what happened here isn't just unethical, it's illegal. Denying service based on assumptions? That's discrimination. Greg looked around, visibly shaken by the rising tide of honest stories. I had no idea this was happening so often, he admitted. That's the problem, Justin said. You didn't know because you didn't look. Brittany had stepped away from the counter, standing now near the crowd. She looked younger than she had before, stripped of her professional armor. I thought I was doing the right thing, following the rules. But I see it now. I saw her papers and still assumed she needed help. That's on me. Emily looked at her, and for the first time, their eyes met without tension. All I wanted was a fair chance, she said softly. to be seen for who I am, not for what people think I can't do. The moment was raw, human, unfiltered. Justin took a step back and looked at the room. What just happened here isn't about one customer or one bank. It's about all of us. What kind of world do we want to live in? One where we look away, or one where we stand up? He paused, scanning the faces in the room. Emily stood up today, and because of that, all of you found your voice too. That's what changes things. Not fame, not pressure. People, speaking, together. The crowd murmured in agreement. Even those who had stayed silent earlier now looked inspired, as if permission had finally been granted to care out loud. One customer who had taken a photo of Emily earlier stepped forward. He looked ashamed. "I owe you an apology," he said. "When I took that photo, I thought I was capturing something sad. I didn't realize I was witnessing someone stand up. You were braver than anyone here today, including me." Emily gave a small smile. "Then share that. Next time, don't just take a picture. Say something." Justin smiled at her words. Exactly. Someone from the back of the room spoke up. "You think people will really listen if we speak up?" "They will," Justin replied. "But only if we keep doing it. Don't let this be a moment that fades when you walk out that door. Let it be the reason you speak up next time you see someone being dismissed, overlooked, or disrespected." Greg walked forward slowly, this time with no rehearsed lines, no management tone, just a man finally confronting what had happened. "I know there's no excuse for what happened today, but there's also no going back. From this point forward, we will change how we treat every customer who walks through that door. Not because of this one incident, but because now we understand the harm silence causes." He turned to Emily. "You've taught us more in one morning than any training ever has. Thank you." Emily nodded, her voice quiet but confident. "Just don't forget it." As people began returning to their places in line, something felt different. The energy had shifted. The bank didn't feel like a place of fear anymore. It felt like a place where something had broken open, and something better was trying to grow in its place. Justin turned to Emily one last time. "You've got courage, the kind that changes people. Don't ever let anyone take that from you." "I won't," she said, and everyone believed her. He gave her a small wave, then turned to leave. But before he reached the door, a boy, maybe 10 years old, called out from behind his mother. "Mr. Bieber." Justin turned. "Can I stand up too?" The room fell into another still silence, but this time it was filled with hope. Justin smiled. "You already did." And with that, he walked out the door, leaving behind a bank full of people who would never look at silence the same way again. More than a moment, a message for the world. As the glass doors closed behind Justin, the world inside the bank remained changed. Not dramatically, not with banners or news crews, but with something quieter, something deeper, a shift in perspective, in posture, in purpose. Emily stood still for a moment, receipt in hand, watching the space where he had just been. But this time, she wasn't watching as someone unsure of her place. She was standing tall, seen, heard, respected. Brittany returned to her post behind the counter, more subdued now, her movements slower, more careful. Greg began gathering his staff near the back office, already discussing how they'd start implementing the changes they had promised. But for Emily, the biggest change wasn't what others did. It was how she now saw herself. She walked out of the bank with the sun on her face and her heart full. She hadn't just opened a savings account. She had opened a door. For herself, and for everyone who'd ever been told, "Come back with someone else." In a world that so often labels people by what they lack, Emily had proven that dignity isn't something given. It's something claimed. And she had claimed it with quiet strength, unwavering presence, and words that reached further than any bank policy ever could. But this story doesn't end here. Because outside the bank, across the city, across the country, there are Still people being underestimated. Still systems that choose convenience over compassion. Still rooms where silence echoes louder than any injustice spoken aloud. And Justin knows that. That's why he didn't stop here. In the days that followed, Justin would receive thousands of messages from parents, from teachers, from strangers who had witnessed what happened at the bank, some in person, most through the story that quickly went viral. But among them was one letter, handwritten, delivered without a name. It wasn't from someone thanking him, it was from someone warning him. A single sentence on the back of a sketch. You think this was about a bank? It goes deeper, and it's not safe. Justin read it twice. Then again. The handwriting looked young, desperate, familiar. And just like that, a new journey began. Because sometimes, what looks like a single act of justice is only the surface of something far more dangerous. And next time, the fight might not be in a bank lobby, but in the shadows of a much darker place. So stay tuned, because what comes next will test everything he thought he knew about power, truth, and the cost of doing what's right.